Terrorist leader Osama bin Laden, whose Afghan headquarters were targeted by America's missile attack last Thursday, has been living in Afghanistan for the past 2 years, welcomed and protected there by the country's rulers, known as the Taliban. Just who are the Taliban? Their name, loosely translated, means seekers of wisdom, and they've been seeking to establish their version of a true Islamic state. A state where an adulterer can be stoned to death, and where a woman is forbidden to work outside the home, and where if she does venture out without being covered from head to toe, she can be hit with a rifle butt. Well, 2 years ago, Christian Amanpour of CNN went to Afghanistan on assignment for 60 Minutes to learn more about the Taliban and the extreme form of Islam they have imposed in a country that's been at war for the past 20 years.
This is where an invading Soviet army met its final test and lost. It is where a superpower and the Cold War began to die. But instead of glory, Afghanistan reaped more war. After US-backed rebels kicked out the Red Army, they turned against each other, and this place fell off the world's radar screen until now. For the past 5 years, the one-time freedom fighters blasted away at each other and their countrymen, with killing power left by the Soviets and the Americans. Tens of thousands died. The capital, Kabul, which had survived the Soviets, was torn apart by the Afghans themselves. Then, on September 27th, seemingly out of nowhere, a mystery army called the Taliban swept in to capture this capital. When the Taliban entered Kabul, their first statement was heard around the world. Here, on this square, they publicly hanged Najibullah, the puppet president left by the departing Soviets. He'd been hiding out here for years. That out of the way, armed with the Quran and the Kalashnikov, they then introduced their own harsh brand of Islam to the people of Kabul. Not just closing down movie theaters, but torching the film, gutting music cassettes, smashing statues, crushing the demon liquor, and forcing all men into the mosques to pray, ordering them to grow beards, threatening the most brutal punishments. But it's the Afghan women who have borne the brunt of the new draconian code. If they venture into the street, this is their view of the world. They are ordered to cover their body from head to toe.
Like this.
If you're wondering why I can walk around not covered from head to foot, it's because the rules are more relaxed for Western women. But if Afghan women don't comply, the punishment is beating or prison. But you don't see that many women in public these days because they've been banished from offices and schools. The principal at this high school in Kabul once directed the education of thousands of female students. Now there are none. They've all been sent home. Authorities say the purpose is to keep the sexes apart, and they promise new schools. But this was already an all-girls school. I asked a 10-year-old girl called Aziza about her ambitions. She told me she hopes one day to become a teacher. She'd like to remain in school, but now she spends all day at home doing what the Taliban expect of her, cleaning house, washing the dishes, and baking bread. A 5-minute drive from the girls' school is the boys' school, and it's full of students. Many in this crowd have mixed feelings about the Taliban, but all of them told me their sisters are not at all happy with the new rulers. Do you have sisters?
Yes, why not? Sure.
And what are they doing now? Are they school age?
My sister was in university, but now she's at home. She's very unhappy about her lessons, about her university, about her future.
And what about boys and girls dating? That's frowned on too.
What about your girlfriends? Do you have girlfriends?
Yes, why not? Sure.
Outside? Can you go out with your girlfriend?
No.
No way, he says. Shia Mohammed Stanakzai is the deputy foreign minister of the Taliban government. He told me the world doesn't really understand what the Taliban are up to. Eventually, they want to provide education for all, he says, but in an Islamic way.
The girls, they can go to school, but provided they go in proper dress. And one thing more should be remembered, that in our religion, men and women, they cannot get together. schools, in universities, and even in offices. They should be separated from each other.
But Mr. Senakzai, many of the schools here in Kabul were segregated. Women went to certain schools, young girls went to certain schools, and boys went to another. So what is it going to take?
Actually, we have many problems. We would like to bring peace and security in the entire country. And after that, we would like to create such a situation so that under those conditions, men and women, they can be educated.
They may claim they're going to make changes, but the immediate effect of banishing women from the workplace has been devastating. Hospitals, for instance, were already desperately short-staffed, and many female doctors and nurses are simply afraid to come to work. At this crowded government orphanage in Kabul, the younger boys are now being taken care of by young orphan girls. The teachers who used to do the job have been sent home, and the only females who dare stay and work are 2 cleaning women. International aid agencies, public and private, have also been hit hard by the restrictions on women. Oxfam, for instance, is largely staffed by women. Sue Emmett, its director in Afghanistan, has suspended all Oxfam operations there in protest at what's happening to her female staff.
And I think it's a combination of feelings for them. It's humiliation, it's degradation, it's anger, deep anger, and frustration that they can't do anything. To go to their houses then and see them, as one of them said, like caged animals, it destroys so much of what was good.
Zakira works for Oxfam. She's a university graduate. Like tens of thousands of other Afghan women, she's been crippled twice. First by the war. Shrapnel from a rocket tore off her leg and her arm. And now she says she's been crippled by the Taliban.
For someone like me who's educated and disabled and now has to stay home, death would be better for us right now. What should we do with our lives?
A lot of women are now unable to go to their work and either too afraid to go to their work. How are they meant to support themselves?
Most of them, they were working at their home, like sewing and knitting, these things, so they can do that, they can carry with that.
But what about office workers?
They should be sitting in their home and they will be paid at their home.
But you know how poor the people are here. The government, you say, doesn't have the money to subsidize them.
They have been already promised by the government that whatever they were getting from the government, they will be paid at their home now.
The problem is there's no money. The country is broke. The government doesn't even have enough to pay its policemen. And the women we spoke with said that even if the government could pay them to stay at home, there's no way they'd accept.
It is not a question of money. That is not what's important to us. We want our basic rights, like women in all other countries.
What role will strict Islam have in the future of this country, and particularly the Sharia law that calls for methods such as amputations for robbery, stoning for adultery? What role will that have here?
Afghanistan is an Islamic state, and our rules and regulation will be according to Islamic rules. If the man has been caught that he is in theft cases or he is in robbery cases, there is certain that his hand will be cut. And the other people, when they see him that his hand was cut, they will never do the same thing.
And stoning women?
I told you that an Islamic government which is coming on power, they will be strict to Islamic rules and regulation, whatever is there.
So, does that mean yes?
I mean to say whatever is in Islam, in the rules and regulation, the punishment which is there for anyone, that will be implemented. We will be strict to that.
But there are many Muslims who argue that what the Taliban are preaching has nothing to do with Islam. The Taliban come mainly from the impoverished countryside. Most of them are young and poorly educated. What knowledge they do have of Islam is rudimentary, picked up at militant training camps. Amir Taheri is an expert on the region. The Taliban claims to be students, but they have sophisticated airplanes, weapons, training. Who are they and who backs them?
They were recruited in 1994 by the Pakistani secret services and started training in camps. They invaded Afghanistan from a point at the border.
There was almost no resistance. Their countrymen had become fed up with the endless carnage, the constant violence, death and corruption under the rival Mujahideen warlords. The Taliban also reportedly received large sums of money from Saudi Arabia and some of the Gulf states. As for the United States, their officials seemed to welcome the Taliban taking Kabul, even after they'd hanged Najibullah and cracked down on women. Glyn Davis is a State Department spokesman.
We've seen some of the reports that they've moved to impose Islamic law in the areas that they control, but at this stage we're not reading anything into that. I mean, there's on the face of it nothing objectionable at this stage.
A week later, State Department officials began to back off. But why had they seemed to favor the Taliban in the first place? Because they believed the Taliban would help them with two big problems. One of them, international terrorism.
Afghanistan is the biggest center of terrorist activities. The people who blow up the Americans in Al-Khobar in Saudi Arabia were trained in Afghanistan. Then there is the question of heroin.
Indeed, Afghanistan's vast poppy fields have become a huge source of heroin, and the country is now the world's second largest producer.
The Pakistanis told the Americans that the Taliban can solve both problems because most of the heroin is produced in Taliban-controlled areas and most of the terrorist camps were also in their areas. This is why the Americans started having good feelings towards the Taliban. It was very attractive. It just doesn't work.
For instance, though the Taliban claims to be shutting down the heroin industry, many experts say they're actually profiting from it, collecting a 20% tax on every kilo produced.
And where does this opium and heroin go to?
Mostly to Europe and the United States.
Even as the Taliban battle to hold on to the capital Kabul, they are demanding to be recognized by Europe and the United States and the rest of the world as Afghanistan's legitimate government.
I think I said before that the word is misunderstanding us. The human right. Actually, we are the only people who is observing strictly the human rights.
That kind of double talk has plagued Afghanistan for the past 20 years, right up to today. From the Soviets, who said they would save Afghanistan, from the Americans, who said they would save Afghanistan, and now from the Taliban, who claim they have.